All right. Welcome, everybody, to the April 2026 session of the Fabric User Group of the Research Triangle. My name is Jason Richards. I am one of the group leads. Obviously, you can read this. I will post the links in chat for the meetup, the LinkedIn group, and the YouTube channel once our presenter starts the session. But let's go through some announcements, get all this out of the way. I'm really super interested in the topic that's going to be covered today, so I really want to hear it. These are just some overviews of how to contribute to a Fabric user group. I'm required by the community to put these out there. So just peruse, pause, do what you need to read them. We did get 3 new members this month to the community, so welcome to all of our new members. That was not in October. I have yet to update that slide to represent the current month, but that's okay. If you'd like to, feel free in the chat channel to introduce yourself by telling us your role, why you're here, maybe a fun fact about yourself. I'll tell you a fun fact about myself. I am a data nerd and a Batman fanboy, so you can't even see it, but the edges of my video feed are the Bat Cave. It's just that my camera sucks at 16 by 9, so I had to squeeze it into a 4 by 3. I had to take up the extra space, so why not make it Batman? So that's the fun fact about me. But feel free to share a little bit of information about yourself. So the latest and greatest news coming out of the Fabric community. Number one, this is a little bit older, but this was the first time we're able to present it in this group, is that there is what's referred to as a semantic link contest. You can get some information by scanning the QR code, so I'll leave this up a little bit, but it actually opened March 30th. The submissions are closed at April 20th. The best way I can describe it is creating a tool that works with semantic link in Fabric. That's the best way I could describe it. And you get prizes for submissions and winning the contest. But feel free to scan the QR code if you're interested in registering or learning more about what this contest entails. Also, there is a FabCon SQLCon event recap that the community is offering. So a lot of sessions, a lot of days, and they've essentially taken the most important keynotes and created a recap about that. Again, I will share this link in the chat channel as soon as our presenter gets started. But those sessions that are identified in the bullets are the ones that they've essentially captured in this recap. All right. And then the 2026 of March feature summary. I just click on this link just to post this essentially in there because these are always important to know what's out and about in Fabric right now. Probably the biggest one that I'm most interested in, especially because AI is the way things are going now, was this MCP. Where is it? I saw it in here, but MCP servers for Fabric API. So you can essentially now leverage, here we go. You can leverage a model context protocol server now to connect to the Fabric API and use your own essentially large language model and tools and skills to ask questions about data and do other things with Fabric. So I think that's a pretty big jump. Leveraging MCP tools to use other models. I just had somebody ask me in class the other day about, can we use another model besides GPT and Copilot? And I was like, well, yeah, you can if you, for data agents, because you can tie those into Foundry, but I wasn't aware that they had this new MCP tool that's out there that allows you to essentially leverage any large language model for that. So that's the most interesting thing I gleaned out of the feature summary, but there's a lot of updates. If you're familiar with the Fabric community and Power BI community, they release updates at least a dozen or 2 dozen at a time. So it's nice to keep track of those whenever you open up the feature summary or the newsletter. Make sure you get the RSS feed to it so you can get those once a month. All right, without further ado, really super happy to present Michael Destein or Destein.
No, you got it right the first time. Thanks.
Destein. All right. Michael Destein is here, works with Quantexa, and he's here to talk a little bit about Fabric IQ. So I'm going to turn the screen over to Mike and let him do his thing. Welcome,
Thanks.
Mike.
Thanks, Jason. I'm glad to be here today. And I mean, for those of you that in the audience, just a couple weeks ago was FabCon. It's the big Fabric user community event of the year. This one was in Atlanta. For the U.S. event, Microsoft hosts a European one as well, which will be about 6 months from now. But at FabCon, all the rage and all the discussion there was there was this new term that a company like Quantexa has been using for many years, but it's the first time I heard it used in a keynote, and it's a term called entity. And another word that I've rarely ever heard, it's a word called ontology. And so the keynote addresses, we're talking about these things called entities and ontologies. And I don't know, Philippa, I don't know about you, but these are pretty techie terms. Where have you used the word ontology in your life before?
Yes, because I come at this and I sort of new to Fabric, and I'm part of what made me fall in love with Fabric was when I learned that they were partnering with Esri, because I'm a GIS person. And so I'm kind of coming out of the academic world. And so first class in GIS was ontology. and so but we look at it in terms of, like, for example, I'll give it like OpenStreetMaps. I did a comparison between the US and China and India. And it's basically illegal in China, but they have it anyways. You just really just don't want to be mapping their military installations. But a playground in the US is a place where children will play with swings and slides. A playground in India is where they play cricket. And that's a way of thinking about ontology. What does a word actually mean? Or we had to have things like, how do you find a lake or a pond? Because it might change in size and coordinates.
Yeah. And Jason, being the kind of the tried and true Fabric expert, are these terms ontology? Is that a word that's, I would say, would you call that a familiar term to the Fabric community?
So as a technical trainer, I teach Fabric classes, and it's there, like right in the lake house, right? So the term ontology is just right there in your lake house. People look at that, and obviously when they see something that isn't introduced in the course, they ask questions about it. So I am very interested in learning a little bit more about what ontology means in the world of Fabric, and especially in Fabric IQ, because this is the new kid on the block, and I love hearing about that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go to a couple clips from FabCon so that you can see firsthand a little bit of how Fabric IQ is positioned and rolled out, and get an understanding of what it does, because then I'll kind of talk a little bit about how to get there, from where you are today, because while the demo is always great, right? We always buy the demo, but right, the reality is, well, my data is not ready for the demo, so how do I get it there? And so that's what we'll ultimately get at. So let's cut to those clips real quick. Jason told me I had to do this one thing first, which I forgot to do the first time. So it'll be.
And I was going to say, I'm really interested in your definitions, because I don't even know if my definitions are truly correct in the application as they apply to Fabric.
Yeah. So let's play the videos before I really dive into it. But I would say, most people that in the data world don't know what an ontology is. They have an understanding of it once you talk about it. They're like, oh, that's what I've been trying to explain. So it's the word they didn't know, but have been trying to explain, of the real world things that exist, and how do I map my data to those things. And so it's, so to me, at a Fabric level or at a data level, ontologies are going to be the real world people, places, things, items that we want to ask questions about and analyze, but don't have a way of easily describing that until now we have Fabric IQ. So let's take a look at what is Fabric IQ at a high level, and then we'll go to a second video that dives a little deeper into the features.
Data is the fuel that powers AI, but data alone is not enough. AI needs an understanding of what the data means, how things relate, and which actions turn insight into impact. Introducing Microsoft Fabric IQ, the semantic foundation that unites data, business meaning, and action into a single unified view of your organization. Model your business using visual, no-code tools, so the people who know your company can adapt it as fast as it evolves. Create entities over all your data in OneLake, not only your analytical data and Power BI semantic models, but also your operational, geospatial, and real-time data. Navigate your business the way it actually runs, not by tables and schemas, but by concepts. And ultimately, elevate your teams and your AI to ask questions, act in the language of your business. Powered by this live, unified view of your organization, actions in real time using rules, and empower AI operations agents to run your business. Because now they understand its live context. Connect Fabric IQ seamlessly with Foundry IQ, uniting your live business context with the knowledge captured in your documents and communications. This combination from Microsoft gives developer-built agents in Foundry unmatched context, so they can make decisions you trust and continuously optimize your operations for superior outcomes. From unified data to unified intelligence, this is IQ in Microsoft Fabric.
Okay, so that's the high level. Now let's take another look at a little bit more of a detailed viewpoint.
World of reporting and analytics and into the world of operations. It really introduces the concept of digital twins and the ability to deal with real-time feeds and the ability to deal with standard operating procedures and with rules and with exceptions and really try to give you the ability to define, to model your entire business and business processes into the world of data so the AI can really reason around those. So let's actually take a look at what does it mean to have Fabric IQ,
Yeah.
and I think we have a demo, and that will be the last demo for us, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the good news is there's a lot more coming this week, so be sure to come back, I think, to room 3008 tomorrow to see Tessa and Yitzhak and their team present more experiences, but I'll show you a little bit about IQ now. So imagine, right, you have a semantic model. You're familiar with this view if you do BI reporting. There's a lot here. It maps those business relationships for, again, this airline scenario, right, where we have flights, we have, airlines, we have crews and so forth. Let's take a look at how we can upgrade that, right, into what we call an ontology model, right? So this is useful. It's really useful for BI, but there are aspects of our business, right, that this does not capture. So we're talking about geospatial data, real-time feeds, rules, alerts. We can go ahead and upgrade that semantic model for BI into an ontology model with Fabric IQ, and then we get a view of our business that is a lot more, interactive and semantic and really true to the relationships between things. So we see this web that captures not just, right, data keys, but business relationships. What's the relationship between a flight and a runway, between a crew and a flight, and so forth, right? And in some cases, there may not be them, but this is what you have the ability to map out. And on top of this ontology, right, you have the ability to look at specific entities, right? So if we have this default view that's being inferred from our semantic model, right, we have the relationship between flights and other elements. We can also start to enrich these entities. So for instance, we're not looking at just, historical data in OneLake, say. We might want to add real-time feeds, events corresponding to the runway for conditions.
Yeah, maybe wind speed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we want rules too. There's a lot more than just data here. So once we go ahead and start adding sources to this, we can bring in weather data, IoT data, telemetry, you name it, and then associated with these entities, we can start to have things like rules that alert our crew, right? If the wind speed exceeds a certain threshold that we set. And all of this data, right, is captured in these entities that are related to the model, and that's a great foundation for AI, right? You don't want to go and just train an operations agent or a data agent that doesn't have a real understanding of the business. So we're enriching this model to set ourselves up well for that agentic intelligence.
So we have the rules, we have the real-time feeds, we have the documents that you can associate, we can have the reports that are part of the, that are really describing everything that is going on with our airport?
Yeah, we didn't forget about BI, right? So we still have the reports, but here you see if we go back into this enriched view for the ontology, once we've started adding in data and alerts, we have everything, right? We also have the graph with relationships, and we have the spatial data, and we have the reports, we have the real-time data. We can go into the enriched views for the flights. We can take a look at everything that's basically been inferred from our semantic model, and then the data and the context that we've added. And here we have the runway view too, which now starts to pick up conditions and real-time feeds that are going to correspond to what our agents need to alert our crew members about.
So this is kind of incredible. We actually created a full description of our business, of operations, of the real-time feeds, of the standard operating procedure, of the rules, and now all this can be fed into the AI agents. And you'll find in Fabric a whole array of different kind of AI agents. You have the one that all of you will be using soon, which is the Power BI chat with your data. It means that you don't have to build anything. It's just built into Power BI, into Fabric, and if you have reports and you have semantic models, you can start typing questions, it will just pull the data out of your report instead of you going and browsing the dashboard and the report on your own. But then you can build custom agents. So you have the Fabric data agent that allows you to build your own custom data analyst about domain specific. And lastly, you have the Fabric operations agents that allows you to go and have on top of the ontology, the real-time feeds, constantly monitor, constantly act, kind of your virtual team members at the back end that make sure that the operations are always running smoothly.
And we want to keep you wanting a little bit more. So be sure to come back tomorrow, again, Wednesday, for that.
Oh, there we go. So that's the Fabric IQ. And we're starting to see a little bit around those ontologies, how graphs start to fit in, and where the data agents fit in. And so, Jason, my understanding is really you build the ontology, okay, that gives you that business level description that tells you what the meaning is of the data. The graph is there to help you traverse the data across all the data sources so that if the data sits in 5, 6, 7 different data sources, like that graph said, bring in the weather data, bring in the runway data, bring in the air traffic control data, lots of data sources to bring in. So I need to traverse that. I don't want to put that in a SQL database. So that's why graph is there. And then the data agents can start asking the question to say, tell me about my customer. And it knows that customer from the ontology that means customer and the relationships that it has. So that was pretty awesome, right? Philippa, though, here's my question for you. Being more of a practitioner, thinking about how the data world operates, that data model that they showed, that was pretty well refined. What does it take to get a data model like that has a single view of your people, of your suppliers, of your enterprise? What would it take to get that for an enterprise? Is that a small endeavor or is that a big project?
I'm going to take you back to my academics, where every professor of mine says, this is what clean data looks like. And appreciate it now because you'll never see it again. And then when I had my first internship, which was with the U.S. Geological Survey, I was set forth into the wild to go collect data and go clean data. And it's messy and it is not clean. And I was using the word playground, for example, like means different things in different cultures. But then you're defining things when you say, okay, we know what customer means. But do we know the difference between a creek and a river and a stream and a lake and a pond? And and how do we have all these different terms for things, and sometimes they actually are the same things and sometimes they're completely different, and do we understand the context that we're using them in? So it's difficult.
Yeah. And that's you've kind of hit on the key thing here. And so let me jump into a little bit of the slides here. So Fabric IQ, Fabric Ontology, it's ready. The software's there. Loved it. Loved the demo. Okay, but is your data ready? And that's the crux of the problem here. Is the software's there, okay, the functionality is there. Now you need to get your data ready for it. And this is where Quantexa is coming in, to the story. So we love ontologies. We think that's a great thing to do. Graph databases, are the right way to traverse the data. The agents are a great way to ask of it. But if you're asking a question about a customer or supplier or one of those entities that aren't well defined in your data, then you're going to ask the AI to kind of guess, right? And AI is, if you study the architecture behind it, it's a stochastic model, meaning it's kind of building it on the fly. It's dynamic. It's not necessarily going to give you the exact same answer every single time. It really looks at the data differently sometimes. And so if you're asking the AI to do the entity resolution and figure out, for this exact customer, bring in the exact data just for Joe Smith, you're asking a lot of the AI. So why not make it easier for the AI? Okay? Now, the problem is, that Joe Smith data, that entity data, is embedded across multiple operational systems. And you'll find, in a single table, sometimes there'll be 2, 3, 4, 5 different entities that are here on the left-hand side that are in one table, in one system on the right-hand side. But then it's also spread out across multiple tables within those systems and multiple systems across the enterprise. So the question is, how do you bridge that gap from where that all that identity data and all that entity data sits, across and is fragmented and across those systems, and how do you bring it into that view? Now, the other side of this is a lot of people think of this as, well, that's just a data quality problem. I'll fix it later. The problem with that, and you got away with it with MDM, and I'll come back to MDM and why that's not right here as well. We thought of data quality as a post MDM problem, and you got away with it because you were just fixing the data, fixing the golden record. With ontologies, the reason you're building these ontologies and the reason you're building all this out is so that you can have good data for your AI. Your AI, your machine learning models that are going to be building predictions, your agents that are going to be building documents around cross-sell strategies for your customers, building other documents around how you want to operate. All that work the AI is doing, if that's built on a fragmented entity model, you're not going to have the right answers. You're not going to have the right predictions. You're not going to have the right documentation built. So in this case, it's not just a simple, I'll go back and fix data quality later and magically everything is good. That's not the case, because what you did is you polluted all of your predictive models with bad data. So it's not just fix the data and still use those models. It's no, go back, fix the data, and rerun all those models, redo all of that work, reprocess all that GPU time, okay, and redo all those tokens that you ran, because you got to redo it. So it's not a go fix it later. It's redo all of it. Right? So you want to get this right from the beginning. Okay. Now there is an easy answer though, and I'm not going to ask for $1 million in 18 months like the MDM guys do. Okay, this is far cheaper and far quicker. Okay? With Quantexa Unify, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of that source data and create a data-driven ontology. We're going to find the entities. Where are the people? Where are the businesses? Where are the locations? Go find all that and create those entities tables and the relationship tables for you so that you can build the ontology very easily. Okay? Now, we are a native Fabric workload. Okay? So you don't have to think about, does it integrate? Okay? Quantexa Unify, if you see it, you look at it here, if you're familiar with Fabric, these are the other Fabric workloads. We're just like another Microsoft workload. The only difference is Microsoft gave us the APIs, the tools to build out the workloads, just like they gave the data science team and the data factory team and the database team the same APIs. We use those same APIs and built our workload just like those other ones. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, so that means that we share the same workspaces. We share the same compute capacities. We share the same developer experience, the same enter IDs. Okay, it's the same within respect of how does it integrate and how does it operate within the Fabric, workspace environment. Now, obviously, we're a different workload. So, Power BI does reporting, and the real-time intelligence does that real-time analytics. So, what does our workload do? Okay, what we do is we take that fragmented data and to that ontological 360 view. We're going to examine the source data. We're going to identify what kind of entities are there, and we're going to say, aha, there's a person here, and not only is it a person, but we've uniquely identified this person to be J citizen. Okay? And then we're going to give it a unique ID. Here's entity ID, and then we also say, and we found this person in this system here, and it has Dynamics ID 123, and we found it over in NetSuite, and here's its NetSuite ID, and we found them in our web logs, and they browsed some stuff, and here's the weblog ID to pull that together. So now you've got an index and an entity index of that unique person or unique company or unique location and a cross reference. Okay. Now a lot of people do suddenly think, hey, this sounds like MDM, and it's not. So I spent 4 years at a company called Cyperion where we kind of created the MDM category. I went to Informatica for 8 years and we scaled out MDM. MDM is very good at creating the golden record when you're trying to get some governance around things like financial reports, because your CFO has to sign off on those, and you need to know specific things about customers and who your customers are and where they come from and suppliers and things like that. So it's a very highly governed, it's a very workflow heavy process to get to this one this one view, if you will, of who that customer is. With what's the address that I should send regulatory info to? What should I send financial data to? Where can I send marketing data to? And these are things that are important, okay? But these are things that are not about creating your ontology. Okay? MDM can be a part of your ontology. It can be a key contributor to the data around the ontology, but it is not in and of itself the data for the ontology. Now, the reason why is partly is that golden record thinking. And you have to define a very rigid data model, and that becomes a problem around there. And then the matching and the rules around who gets to approve it, and that becomes problematic when you get to scale. So you need a more probabilistic approach, something that's very good and accurate, and it's going to get it right, 99.999% of the time, but doesn't require the heavy workload. The second thing MDM does is it's very single domain. Yes, it's MDM, multi-domain MDM. They talk about that, but when you look at the implementations, it's going to be a customer domain for marketing or a supplier domain for finance. And they're going to be very specific because again, it goes back to the data model rigidity part. But now again, here for ontologies, it's by definition, you have to be cross-domain. Okay. Third thing around MDM, it's mostly reference data, name, address, phone number. You can get into other things if you're a retailer, shoe size, favorite color, okay, but it's still reference data. Whereas here we're talking about equipping an agent and equipping AI to make decisions and reason over data. You want to give it more information rather than less. So you want all of the reference data and the transaction data and the interaction data. And now you're talking not tens of millions, but now you're talking potentially billions of records. And then lastly, it's understanding those relationships. And so, in MDM, you can do things, some hierarchies around, legal hierarchies, maybe some sales territory management. But ontologies have an infinite number of relationships and types of relationships. And so you need to really embrace that idea of relationships as a core piece. So that's kind of the differences of MDM versus what we do with Unify and the entity resolution model. So ultimately, we think there's two breakthroughs that have just happened here. Okay? Microsoft, a year or 2 years ago with one architecture with Fabric and OneLake, awesome idea. Okay, but with Fabric IQ, they've now done that semantic breakthrough. Okay, the semantic breakthrough tells you the meaning of what a customer is. The graph tells you how to find the data. Quantexa Unify is going to tell you of the one and only one customer that you need to reason on. So you need both that meaning and identity to be trustworthy. Okay, so Jason, Philippa, let me stop there before I jump into a demo. What are your thoughts about this? And I guess first and foremost, do you see this fragmentation problem as being a real barrier to customers adopting ontologies and Fabric IQ?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can even, and I hate to go into semantic models because they are both, a form of MDM, but when you go into like creating a Q&A, right? So back in Q&A and Power BI, they had synonyms because different things were different properties, but now they've included these relationships, like how these things relate to each other. And to me, that was just groundbreaking. Seeing that is that we're creating a graph database where not only we're adding additional context to the AI. We're not the detailed information can be in an MDM, but what I'm seeing here is that this is essentially a graph kind of database object where we're actually building context between the connections of the graph, where we're building relationships into this. Like this person, this customer purchases, and this manufacturer manufactures. So we're adding additional context into the potential of creating an AI agent to give it that extra firepower to get you the right answer in the right space at the right time.
So, all right, so let's jump into a demonstration. Okay, so
I was gonna say I'll jump in.
sorry,
I was not sure if you were gonna respond to Jason. I'm gonna bring it back to my first language, which is actually film production. And what you were saying at the beginning, it just reminded my brain was screaming, "Fix it in post! Fix it in post!" And that's really expensive. You talk about multi-millions of dollars. You can't fix it in post. That's the most expensive solution you can have. And so if you think of data analysis, that's production. How do you solve all production problems? In pre-production. You are pre-production. And I think of Hitchcock. He actually said his film sets were like just so boring. It was watching paint dry because he was meticulous about pre-production. So there were no surprises in production. And then he got it done and made fantastic movies, and obviously went on to make many of them because he was so meticulous about his pre-production. So that's what this all reminds me of.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key though, is for AI there is no post-production. It's a living thing, and if you've given it bad info, it's going to live off of that bad info until you somehow extracted that. And extracting bad info out of good sometimes gets very difficult.
That's what I was referring to, the fix it in post, when you're like, you've got to go back and rerun those tokens, and you've got to go back and rerun that model. And I'm like, yeah, that's the wasted energy that you could have totally avoided if you had actually done the proper planning.
Yep. And a literal waste of electrical energy at that. All right. So let's take a look at an example then. So here, what we're going to talk about is a CRM example of a company that we're all familiar with, a company called Contoso. Contoso, in this example, has grown grown over the years, organically and through acquisitions. So in our example, Contoso has 3 different CRM systems, one focused on their North American operations, one on their European operations, and they acquired a company, a subsidiary that uses Dynamics, and that's a global operation. So the question is, how do they identify cross-sell, upsell opportunities across these new channels, and how do they do that in a modern data agent way that their sales leaders are asking for? No more. Don't give me a Power BI report and let me try to figure it out. I want to talk to my agent and ask questions. So that's the challenge that we're gonna address here. So let me switch real quick to. We have a real live demo, unlike a lot of other examples. Some things around, and here we are in Fabric. Okay, so for those of you that haven't really dove into Fabric yet, it's a common user interface. There's navigation tools on the side. Here I'm looking at some folder structures. And in my example, I've got 3 bronze landing zones for each of my sources, my Dynamics, my Salesforce Org 1 and Salesforce Org 2. I've also created a data lake called Customer 360 that has shortcuts to all of the tables in these 3 lakes as well. This is where I'm going to push the output from the Quantexa work that we'll do in the project. So Customer 360 will be kind of where everything is. Now, I've picked the lead table out of Dynamics, and when we talked a little bit earlier, we talked about those entities. Philippa, you asked what's my definition. So I'm going to give you a very pedestrian definition here. My definition is people, organizations, devices, and locations. Those are the ontology entities I care about right now. So let's play a little game. Who can spot the entity in the data table? Take a look at this table. What columns represent entities that I'm interested in? People, organizations, devices, and locations. You can't win if you're on mute, Philippa.
I
People.
see companies. Companies?
Yeah, companies. So company is okay. There you go. Company is one entity. Okay. Are there any other entities in this table?
There are people.
People. Like which columns represent people?
I mean, you combine first name, last name.
Yep. Yep. Good. Good. Is there a location? Do we see a location?
Is country an entity?
Countries. You could. I mean, you might say, yeah, country is an entity in and of itself. But location here, right? It's their address is the location. Okay?
Right. Sorry. Yeah. All of the locations.
Yeah, that can be one, right? Their device, their phone, right? There are communication, channels can be device and phone together. So here we have person, company, device, location, country reference data, lots of different entities, all in one table and one row of one table. So how do you extract all that out? How do you get a single view of Acme when Acme is here in the lead table and Acme is going to be over here in the contact table? And how do I get a single view of this location, right? So you want those single entities, but it's buried, right? It's buried in the identity is buried here in the tables. And so if you build a semantic model just with those tables and those three examples, it's going to look something like this, right? Some connected data. Okay, the connections in CRM. CRM gives me reference or referential integrity. Okay, the account table is linked to the opportunity table and linked to the contact table. But guess what? The lead table in CRM is a standalone table. It doesn't have any referential integrity. And now compound that by 3, right? I got a lot of islands, a couple archipelagos with bridges, but nothing really connecting all that data. Where's the connective tissue? Okay, where is my entity? Okay, when I want to say where's the person? Okay, is it in contact? Is it in lead table? Is it in contact lead 2? Where is it? Right, and that's the question. That's the problem. You can't build your ontology on top of fragmented data, so you need to put something together. Okay, so what are we going to do here? Actually, I jumped ahead here. Let me delete this real quick. I jumped ahead in the demo. I forgot I prepped it. It's what happens with live demos. You can't get too far ahead. Here in the workloads tab in Microsoft Fabric, you're going to find a number of partner workloads. Right? So we're not the only one. There's lots of them out there. Okay? We happen to be last on the list. I'm not sure why. I thought it was alphabetic, but we're last. They must like us the best, I think, because they're easiest to find. But here we are, last on the list, Quantexa Unify. And so you'll find some information about that. Most of you are going to see a button right here that's going to say add the workload. And I've already added it. If you don't have rights, it might say contact your admin to add it. Okay, so you do need to be your Fabric admin to click that button, even if you do see it. But once you add that workload, you're going to have access to our workload with sample data. Okay, so if you want your data, we'll talk about that in a minute. But that's getting a trial or getting the developer edition, which we're happy to do. But the idea is that you can try it out with sample data. You don't have to ask us. You don't have to talk to us. You can go play with it, see what it does. We have a few tables up there to let you do some of the address some of that problem. Okay, but let's go ahead and I've created a problem or a project here. And when you create a project, it's empty, and the first thing you do is add the data. So I'm going to go back to my 360 database. And I'm going to add a data source. So we're connecting to that data lake. As I said, there was a bunch of shortcuts, Okay, so we're seeing shortcuts to all of my tables that were in there. Again, we don't know their shortcuts. It acts and looks just like Fabric on anything else. So, but here, let me pick the lead dynamics table, and that we played that game of spot the entity on. And so remember, we went through and we spotted some entities right here. There was individual, right, that were represented by first and last name. There was a business represented by company, and there was a phone, a device. There was a location. And so what's happening here is it went through and identified that game. The software played the spot the entity game. It spotted that first name and last name belong to an entity type called individual. It spotted that company belongs to an entity type business, so on and so forth. Now, what it also did was it said those things map to the entity resolution model, okay, within Quantexa, and these are the things that we call it. Okay, our company is headquartered in London, okay, so they use, instead of first name or given name, they use things like forename. Okay, but that's essentially the model, right? We just go through and there's a number of attributes that you can map it to, okay, but we've gone ahead and pre-mapped it. You don't need to know this. You can override it if you want to tinker with it. Okay? Most of the time when I tinker with it, I break it. I make it worse. Okay? So 99% of the time when I've tinkered with it, it's not improved it. So most of the time you don't need to. Okay? But it does a pretty good job. It maps everything over. Okay? And then you do that for all of it. So I jumped ahead a little bit. Okay? Oops, sorry, not that one. I did it for all of the lead and contact tables. Okay? And so when I go through, you'll notice, so here was the lead org table. If I look at contact, it's going to look very different from a schema perspective. Okay? And the beauty of this is that you don't need to worry about that. Okay? The software behind the scenes is figuring all that out for you. Okay? And all you need to do is say, did it get it right? So here, again, first name, last name mapped to an individual. There's no company here. There was email and phone. Okay? And then, the address got mapped over again, as well. Okay? So all this is doing at a configuration time is you're saying, this is my data. And yes, you got the entity mappings right, so that when I want to use this in a exercise, to run the project, I can then do that. And so here I clicked on new iteration. So think of this as now running the workload to match things. I give it a name, RTP, and then I pick which tables in my project folder do I want. Now the reason, you might have lots of them. And so sometimes you might be saying, I'm focusing on a supplier, I'm focusing on, a US supplier. And so you might use different tables and different data sets, but you get to pick and choose, which ones you use. You also get to pick and choose, how strong of a match or how loose of a match do you want. Okay? The default is built on our matching engine that's been used. This matching engine, by the way, behind the scenes, this is the same engine that many of the banks use to fight financial crime. Lots of governments use to fight fraud. It's a machine learning trained engine that's been trained on over 200 billion records. And so we packaged that up and said, okay, here's the default, meaning pretty much this is the standard use case for most people. We've also set a fuzzy use case and then a strict use case. Now we can also work with you to customize these on a customer by customer basis. But these three are the kind of the basic out of the box ones. You would pick fuzzy when you want a looser set of match rules. You would pick strict when you want it to be more strict. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example. A good example of fuzzy might be if the first name's the same, the address is the same, and the phone number is the same, but the last name has changed, you can still consider that the same person because it's probably a case of somebody getting married and changing their surname. Okay? But on a strict case, no, do not match them up. Okay, because that could be somebody that's just happens to have similar information. Okay, so you get to control that on that model, and then you control where do you put it. So where do you write that out? So I already ran one of those jobs, and this one I used all of the data sources. I set the match rule, the match level to fuzzy, and then it went through. Okay, and remember, it saw all those different entities, so it created an entities table for every one of the entity types that I saw. So your address, business, email, individual. And so you'll see an address entities table, a business entities table, and so forth. We also create the cross-reference. So this entities table, think of that as the unique set of people. So here, like this, we found 57 unique people out of a total of 110 records. So in other words, there were 110 records across these 6 source systems. It's a very small data set. I'm not exercising scale, right? But across these 6 systems, there were 110 people that it found. Of those 110, there were 57 unique people. Okay? And so those unique people are that entities table, and then the cross-reference is this records table. Okay, these tables, this entities table and this records table, become very important in the next step, because now you've got your ability. So here I did it for, so this project was focused on individuals. Okay? I did a second project focused on accounts. And so now what I have is let me scroll this a little bit, zoom in a little bit here. Okay, now I have my individual entities table and my cross-reference. And so the cross-reference tells me where did I find that person in all of those source tables. Okay, so now I've, with a unique entity ID, cross-reference to their Salesforce ID, to their Dynamics ID, and so forth. Let me pause there and see if there's any questions about what we just did. We just made a big leap. We went from this model with no linkage to this model with complete linkage, only with running this workload around individuals and this workload around the business entities. That generated these 2 tables respectively so that I could link them up to the source tables.
Yeah, that seems really powerful and really effective for actually then being able to sort of move forward to the next steps.
Right, and that's exactly it. So now the next step is this generate ontology, and when you do, now you start getting things like customer, and customer being the entity, it's bound to that Quantexa table, that business entity tables that we generated. Okay, so now you have your customer entity so there's a table with one row for one customer, cross-referenced, okay, with this has Dynamics account by the cross-reference table. So this business records, so that records table. Again, coming back to, we generated this table, this Quantexa Contact 360 view business entities and view business records. That is exactly these tables here. This view business entities and the view business records. This Dynamics account is the account Dynamics table. That's your raw source table. Okay, but going back to the customer, we now see that this customer can potentially, they don't always, they can potentially have a Dynamics account, they can have a North American account, they can have an EU account. And then when you look at it from the person perspective, it's a similar thing where they could be a Dynamics lead, they could be a Dynamics contact, they could be a North American contact, and so forth. And then when you look at say the contact portion of it, okay, a contact is contact of an account. Okay, they have that relationship. We already know that. Okay, but a contact is a person as well. And so now you can start to understand when you're talking about a contact record, how they're related to accounts and how they're related to people. All of these things, then if you look at it from a graph perspective, and so I just switched from this is the ontology view, so showing you the business definitions and the business relationships. Okay, but this directly underpins or feeds, if you will, the graph. So now you can see the relationships, from entity to entity. So starting from person here. So again, person on the left, that again is that, I don't want to change it. That is the entities table that we generated. Okay, you can see how they have relationships with all of the other objects. Okay, now these objects are source tables. So that's the contact table in Salesforce. Here's the lead table in the North American org of Salesforce. Here's the Dynamics account object in the Dynamics system. And so naturally, a Dynamics account is going to have the relationship with the contact and opportunity, but it's not going to have the look back to say, okay, well, that's a customer, and that customer also has a North American account or could also have an EU account, of which that EU account could be related to a person, and that person could be a Dynamics lead. So with the graph, you're able to traverse it and ask questions that can link things, across that chain, that daisy chain, if you will. And graph databases do that very well. SQL databases don't do that linkage very well. And so that's where Microsoft Graph really solves that problem of being able to traverse the data without having to copy it, without having to summarize it, without having to do things in a data warehouse fashion to organize the data up. So now, when you can ask questions of the graph. So here I've prepared a query. Okay, this query is essentially saying, find me a customer that has a North American account, and they have a Dynamics account, and they have an EU account. And I also put a filter on there that the name must contain green. So here on the customer object, I'm saying that the name of the customer. Here you can start seeing, here the name field in customer, okay, must contain green. Okay, now when I run that query, it's looking across that graph and saying, yes, I found that customer containing green, and it actually has two Dynamics accounts, okay, one with Green Energy Co. and one with Green Energy LLC, and it also found an EU account and a North American account. Okay, and so now when you ask the agent, I forgot, I skipped a step back here. I forgot to show you something around this agent, because here I'm just going back here. I skipped this step to show you, but I created a data agent in Fabric IQ. It's super simple. It's new item, data agent, and you pick your data source. I picked the data source so this semantic model is the data source for this agent. And when I asked that agent to give me a 360 view of green energy, it comes back and says, yep, I found Green Energy Co. and found some people. I asked it, which CRM systems did it find? It said, well, I found it in Dynamics, okay, and I found it in Org2. Okay? And then it said this, no data was found in other systems. Okay? This is the problem, right? This is the problem that we're ultimately solving with the entity quality, problem, this entity resolution, is we're making sure that the agent understands when I ask a question about green energy, okay, we're not asking it to figure out and do the entity resolution, because it did it. It said, yeah, I found you in Dynamics and I found you in Org2, but there was no other data found. Yet when I come back to my graph, okay, it didn't find this North American account. Okay? For some reason, it didn't find it. It's there. Okay? And when I ask an agent that's connected to my CRM ontology, and I say, give me a 360 view of green energy, it comes back and says, yeah, here's a North American account, an EU account, and two Dynamics accounts. So now when you're asking it, Is this a cross-sell opportunity? Is this a churn situation? Should I extend credit to this customer? Now it's looking at the complete picture of that customer, not the incomplete and fragmented view. And that ultimately is the difference of having entity quality built in to your process versus not having it built in.
I love that. I have just a question. I don't know where this fits, but like as you've heard my various learning journey, I'm wrapping up my studies in law school. And so I think a lot about governance, and I know governance was like a big topic as well at FabCon this year. They're very excited about governance. So would you have your own like tab in there that could be kind of a governance? So, you know, who in that list would need to be GDPR, who's CCPA? Could that be like mapped onto that as well? Or is that something that's done
Well,
totally separately? If that
well,
was
now
something
yeah, you're asking an interesting question, okay, that an ontology can help you answer, right? Your question or your directive is, I have a regulatory statute that is about a person or about a company. It's not about CRM record 123 columns A7 and A6 and column B3. Okay? It's I have a right to delete. You must delete me or mark me as deleted. Okay, it's not about where I sit in SAP or where I sit in your analytics system. It's go mark me as deleted. Don't use my data. Right? That's a policy about the entity, not about the record. And therein lies the new wave of in this case regulatory compliance. But whether it's regulatory or whether it's a sales opportunity, risk management, you're going to be asking questions and demanding things of the entity and not of a specific record or a small subset of records that MDM has purview over.
super interesting. Thank you so much. And Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by this. So yeah, I mean, it's just extending context beyond just individual records. So I totally get why we need to implement something like this.
Yeah.
It's a great topic. What I'm seeing, the way that how Quantexa fits into this puzzle is that you accelerate the entity generation process and the ontology generation process so that we can leverage then Fabric IQ to make those and data agents to get those insights that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of comes down to it. If you're going to do it, if you want to take advantage of these capabilities, and I think most organizations do, the question is going to not be if, it's how. And you can take the approach of, I don't care about entity quality. I'm just going to slap, my data, my agents on top of that data. You're going to get pretty good answers. They're going to be very believable, but they're not quite right. Okay. If that's okay, then go with that. And then, but if not, and for most people it's not going to be okay, then the question is, well, how do I get it right? And then I think there's kind of three paths to choose from. There's the MDM path. Okay? It will work for a small set of data. It won't work for a large volume of data, and it's very expensive for the amount of data sources that you need to do here. So that becomes problematic out of the gate. And by the way, it's going to take you at least 6 months if you're really fast at MDM implementations. Most people, it takes 12 to 18 to get there. And so the time frame to get there is just exorbitant, and the cost is exorbitant. So I don't think that's a real answer. So then the second way is build your own approach. Code it in, and that it'll work to some extent, but you're gonna get very fragmented views of your anti-fragmentation technology. And so you're going to have different versions of it running in different places, and it's not going to be simple. It's not going to be maintainable, and it's definitely not going to be well integrated into Fabric like you saw with Quantexa Unify. So we believe that we've timed it, where we are the best solution in the market for this, and right now the only one that can solve it this well. And and right in time for people to get started on their Fabric IQ projects. So think of this as a small prerequisite step. Think of it, for those of you that were in the Snowflake world, to populate your cloud data warehouse, you needed connectors, like Fivetran to populate the data warehouse. Think of it like this: you need Unify to populate your ontology so that you can do the interesting things with your ontology that you want to do.
I have another question.
Yeah, please.
What is your relationship to Esri? Because I feel like you are the pre-step to Living Atlas, for example, is the Esri ArcGIS Pro equivalent of the cleanest, best, what's the word? Just like if something's in Living Atlas, it's the cleanest data that you can use. And it's for mapping. And then what I'm excited to see in both of your examples had maps that I didn't see there last year. Because now I'm so excited that Fabric and Power BI are really taking maps to the next level with their partnership with Esri. So I feel that if anybody's going to utilize these amazing location intelligence features, they also need you, because you have to have clean data and prepare data if you're going to do geospatial analysis. And that's what I am sort of setting myself up to be, as an advocate and a spokesperson for all of the Esri integration into Fabric.
Well, I think what you just signed yourself up for was our next session on how to use entity resolution and mapping technologies together to create a single geographical view of your supplier or customer. So yeah, let's work on that demo together. It sounds interesting.
I love, well, to Jason's point of having recruited me to help with the Research Triangle community, I set up my own Fabric user group called Location Intelligence, because I want to go further in specifically that conversation. Because I was just on the Microsoft Reactor stage introducing it, because I don't see other people in the Microsoft ecosystem who don't actually work for Esri like really talking about it yet, and they should be, because it's so exciting.
That's fantastic.
So Jason, I turn it over to you, and Michael, thank you so much. And
Thank
we've
you
got
for
Gary
having me.
here. Hi, Gary.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael, so much. Great topic. Very much current news in this, so very relevant. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And with that, we'll wrap it up. I mean, we're TBD on our next month's session, so keep an eye out on the community channel. Make sure you follow us on Meetup and become a member, and then you'll get access to all these great events. But looking forward to chopping this up, throwing this on the YouTube channel, and exposing this to the world, because it's great information. Thank you again, Michael, for taking time out to present today.
Saying thank you
Sorry,
so
I
much.
just had one of those bugs in my throat. Ugh. Anyway, that wraps up the April session of the meeting. Thank you for everybody, presenters, and everybody that joined today, and hope to see you next month. Have a great evening all, and we'll catch you on the next one.